Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. So in today's video I'm doing another book video. Oh my gosh, I know how much you guys love these videos. So in today's episode I'm going to recommend 10-ish books that as a comp lit student I think everyone should read. It's going to differ from if you do English lit or French lit because, you know, I've read a wider selection, let's say, kind of like a little bit of everything, which I think I just love. I just freaking love my degree. I honestly don't know what I would have done if I'd have done English lit. I would have gone insane or probably dropped out of my course because I don't want to read Paradise Lost more than I have to. So who was I talking to recently that said they'd read the entire thing? That must be awful. I've got them like lined up on the floor down here. I'm gonna go through, yeah, the 10-ish books I think you should all read to give you a really good cross-section. Well, European literature. I mean, it's called comp lit, but it kind of should more be called like European lit. I mean, that's not true. We've done some like Caribbean stuff. Caribbean. You read your classics and you've done any Caribbean drama, you would know that pops up. So comp lit is like the best thing to learn this kind of things with. It's a lot of fun. I really enjoy my degree. For anybody asking if you should do comp lit over English lit, yes. Let's start. Oh, also, do you like my top with the, I haven't worn this top in ages. I like recently rediscovered it in my wardrobe. That's things I've got called it. I'm gonna go through this chronologically and you'll kind of see how like it goes like more, I don't know which way around. It's more like western, like it goes more like towards the west as we go through this, which I in itself find quite interesting. We're gonna start with the oldest thing. If you watch my videos, like book videos before, you'll know this is coming. You should read Homer, so I'm gonna stick these together like it's one book. I'm smooth. I kind of think everyone should read the Iliad and the Odyssey, which technically in my head do count as the same thing, because obviously the Odyssey is continuation of the Iliad. I'll fess up, I haven't actually read the Odyssey, as you can see by how intact it is. You can tell I've read the Iliad because it's fucking battered to shit. When we were like 7 or 8, my mum bought us like a kid's copy of the Odyssey, so we read that back to back, or the three of us did. And so I know the stories, I just haven't actually read the text version of it, which strictly speaking I don't think necessarily matters considering it's like a written down version of an oral tradition, so that's not like, this is kind of the lines are a bit blurry when you get to that one, but I think they're fucking amazing. Like the Iliad was fucking fantastic. I absolutely adored it. I read it so quickly. I'm dyslexic, so if I read anything quickly, you know it better be fucking good. Basically the stories and especially the characters, they come up again and 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 again. Because seeing as these being like some of the like the first works of especially like Western literature, it's something that people have always read, and especially when you go like a few centuries back, it's people would study classics and they wouldn't study like contemporary literature. So it's like a mark of prestige that a lot of people like took it as. Now it's just fucking fun and everyone can read it, so everyone should. And also you get basically a lot of your references down. I've said this so many times, these are two of the things that you can read to get a lot of references, especially mythological ones, which I will get to a bit later. You kind of just need them to do any Western literature, and also they're really fucking fun. So I highly recommend these. Don't be put off in terms of, because I think some people do get put off being like, oh, it's classics, or oh, that's pretentious, or oh, don't, that's absolute bullshit. Like there's a reason these are like, I say it's a reason they're classics, but the reasons these have like, you know, withstood the test of time so fucking well is because they're really fucking good. If you've had to study these, like when you're younger, I'm sorry, I know how much that puts somebody off a text, but they're really good. If you have a chance to, I'd really recommend them. Moving a little bit further forward and now hopping over to Italy, I got Ovid, Metamorphoses, and Virgil, the Aeneid. I will fess up to also not having read either of these. I'm gonna do a video, just Emma recommends books she hasn't read. But the fact is, like, we know a lot of the stories. Basically, Ovid is a lot of the mythological stories that we know from classics, especially like, you know, Greeks, Romans, but it's written down. So it's like I started reading a good chunk of this, but then I know all of these stories anyway, so it's just interesting to be like, this is where really we know them from, and the recorded version of everything. Because obviously, you know, the problem when you go further back is that, you know, oral traditions, you know, they don't get written down, everything gets lost. That's, you know, great if it's part of your culture, but then problematic when you try and study it because everything's gone, because people die. It's just a lot of myths. It just gives you the basis for so much of what people have written. I just think, and the Aeneid as well, it's like I find them foundational texts in a way that it's these that like literature is built on, Western literature is built on, so I just highly recommend them. Earlier I was reading, because at the moment I'm reading Stendhal, Trotthouse of Parma. Earlier one of the characters said like, oh, he doesn't want to be compared to Cassandra, but like if you don't know who Cassandra is, that makes no fucking sense, because it's a really like, just a reference, like he doesn't go into, he just says I don't want to be compared to Cassandra, and obviously she is the one who sees the fall of Troy. She fucking knows that's gonna happen, but obviously she's been cursed, so she's always like cursed to predict the future, but nobody's ever gonna fucking believe her. So that is really important when a character compares himself to that and what that means for that character. But if you haven't read it, you wouldn't know, and then you miss out on a large chunk of how that character in this other text feels about themselves. Because it's almost like people expect, like the authors often do kind of have a level of like assumed knowledge, which then changes throughout the centuries, but like I feel like now we maybe don't read classics as much because we're like, oh, but look at all this other cool stuff. Move on to the next one that I think everybody also should read. I have studied it too. It's Dante's Divine Comedy. If you have to read any of it, just read Inferno. Obviously read the entire thing, but like read that one. Oh my god, my favourite is like the drawings and stuff. Everybody loves a good drawing. Can you see that? Maybe not. But as well, I just like the way that it's like structured, like physically I think is really cool. Just, it comes up so often. It comes up again and again and again and again and again and again, especially for different kinds of torments people go like are forced to go through, you know, when you're certain kind of dick. It's funny because Odysseus gets shoved down here. See, everything references back to everything else, which is like basically one of the fundamental ideas as well of comp lit. So you kind of like, if you want to study comp lit, just maybe read a few things like over the summer or whatever, because you'll hear these things so often. Definitely do Dante. Like the amount of times we're doing the romantic, I do a lot about the romantics, even though I don't like the romantics. I keep coming back to the romantics. I don't know why this keeps happening, but they really like Dante and they like coming back to that lots and lots and lots. So it's especially funny like with different like literary movements which prefer different past text, historical texts, not the word I want, like what I want to say. This video is honestly much more about the lasting impactful influence of a text rather than the actual text itself. It's not about what's in it, it's about what this did, you know, and what this continues to do. So I definitely recommend reading Inferno, because that's a wild ride and a half, especially as a Catholic. I'm like, okay, intense. Because we read part of Dante's like this module, like author in the text. And it's quite interesting as well that Dante like is the one being led through hell. And that practical, the kind of ideas of it, you get that in Joyce, which I'm going to recommend later, so just seeing the author in it. I don't know how much I enjoyed it. It's not like, I'm not recommending these books because you're going to enjoy them. It's because they're going to be so useful to you. This like references 101, kind of. You see this lovely cross section of everything ever. It's difficult because it's not entirely simple to express why, but I'm trying. I recommend Dante, especially if you like the romantics. And then again, we're going back to romantics, like read Hamlet. I know, I've talked about Hamlet before. I don't like Hamlet. I think Hamlet is a massive wanker and he's such a baby, but like, it's so important to read this. If you read any Shakespeare, just read Hamlet. Just do it. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of Shakespeare. I'm just not. I never have been, probably never will be, but you can grow to appreciate a text even if you don't necessarily like it. It's just such a classic, and all of these are like classics, because I think people just are so captivated by Hamlet's character that I just really think it's worth reading, because sort of like almost not reproductions of the character, but like the essence of his character come up so often. And no, Hamlet isn't in love with his mother. If one more fucking person says that, like, I'm not even joking. If you're a student and you're studying Hamlet, do not even mention that, because that is the most A-level fucking thing you can say about Hamlet, is that he's in love with his mother, okay? That is the most A-level fucking thing you can say about Hamlet. So don't say it, because personally I don't think it's true. And it's really annoying to hear people go like, he's in love with his mum. Like, for fuck's sake, take a different way of reading something. Oh my god. But it's also interesting, if you want to look at influence of a text over time, a really good thing is to think about literary criticism, particularly criticism on Shakespeare through the centuries. If you look at how that shifts and the things they focus on and the things they talk about and how that changes over time, is really indicative of how like the text physically obviously doesn't change, the words are the words, but the way the words interact with the people is really interesting. And that's personally what I think everyone should focus a bit more on, is rather than just like looking into the text and thinking the text is like this one thing on its own that isn't influenced by anything ever. That's just not fucking true. Like, you should always think about what a text has done rather than what just the text is, because obviously people A, wrote it, and B, people read it. So like how it interacts is so important, and especially the way that things manage to stay in print, and then the things that fall out of print but then they get rediscovered and they go back into print because people really like them, but you know, at different times people prefer different things. Like the way that Dante sort of like suddenly like resurges with some, I think English romantics especially, it's interesting. Can you see that Emma really cares very little necessarily for what is actually in the book, but more what the book does to the people who read it at the time and how we now interact with text as well. That's interesting. Me excited about my degree and love it to absolute bits, and is absolutely terrified at the prospect of ending it because she's maybe never going to find something she loves as much. No idea what you're talking about. But that is, I think, my main point, is text is so like influential to the point of like it doesn't actually matter what is in the text, just what the text has done. I'm losing my words because I'm getting excited, so like getting ahead of the words I want to say. Right, next thing. Okay, we're gonna jump a little bit further forward in time. I don't know if I have anything from the 17th century. I probably do, but I feel like Europe gets, I don't know if Europe gets a bit boring. It probably doesn't, but literarily it doesn't interest me. It doesn't interest me. So we're going to jump forward to the 18th century, where you know my heart is at very much. This is older. I think everybody should read a bit of Mr. Pope. What is that quote? There's a quote about Pope. Something Mr. Pope. Can't remember what it was. What is it? It's on the screen. It's going to frustrate me so much until I go look it up after this video. Yeah, but I think everybody should read Pope. Interestingly, Pope also did some really good, important translations of, you guessed it, the Iliad and, oh no, did I just get lipstick on the Odyssey? I didn't, it's fine. But yeah, he did some translations of the Iliad and the Odyssey that were fucking expensive. They were incredibly expensive, but then that generates this 18th century interest in classics, and then, you know, neoclassicism, oh hello, it comes all back again because everyone finds it really fun. And then it's actually quite interesting with like the Renaissance. This is medieval, but like in the Renaissance you get this quite interesting thing of everyone starts rediscovering classical texts during the Renaissance, and then you, after the medieval period, when they're like, finally, like, let's look at some, because the medieval period hate all of that shit, because God stuff. Emma's great with words. But you can see, right, even just me talking about that, you can see how everything comes back. Like, it's so, it's not cyclical, but it's like the most complicated fucking spider web you've ever fucking seen. Have you ever been into a library? Like, there is so much stuff in there from ever, and everyone reads everything and it all works together, and complicated is a great degree. But if you want someone who can deal with like the big picture, maybe it isn't the degree for you. Like, dyslexic brains are like actually geared towards, structurally are different, and actually are way better at doing the big picture. So I think maybe that's why I'm so drawn to it. But yeah, what I was saying, yeah, Alexander Pope, I think everyone should read him. Personally, the example I can give is, in here, what do we have? Oh, I didn't realise I had the Rape of the Lock. Do I have the entirety of the Rape of the Lock? Rape being used as theft, and lock a lock of hair, because the original meaning of the word rape was to steal. So then if you look at that in the, you know, context of the modern usage of the word, is quite an interesting thing. So that's some food for thought. Not where I was going, but I always feel the need to specify to people who don't necessarily know that's how this is being used. But I haven't read The Rape of the Lock, but I have read An Essay on Criticism, and it's just, Pope is A. Rape of the Lock was, when it came out, very, very, very influential. Everybody read it. It was like crazy town. Let me teach you things. But he writes in heroic couplets, and they're one of my favourite things. It's like iambic couplets, so the rhythm of it is so like fun to read, especially like as an English speaker. And he just has so much fun with the words, and he plays with them so much, and I love them to pieces. And one of my favourite lines of Pope ever is that fools rush in where angels fear to tread. Or fools rush in where angels fear to tread, which is interesting. That quote in itself is quite interesting because people so often split it up. It's or Fools Rushed In or Where Angels Fear to Tread, people generally don't put the two lines together, which I think is quite interesting. People don't even realise they belong together, but they do. I think that is from an essay of criticism. It's great. And it's a lot of fun. And you then can see kind of classics like creeping up in there. And I think it is just very, for me, this is like so 18th century. This essay on criticism came out 1711. So I think this just is very, it's like, personally, I find that this sets the tone for the English 18th century. I like this a lot. I like Pope. Pope can be a bit of a wanker though. As a person, he can be a bit of a wanker, but I like his stuff. Also, I really love the whole genre of mock epic. He writes for Dante. And I've already discussed that epics are really important to read. You can see where this is going. I pick one thing up and then as a result I can pick up 5 other things and be like, this relates to this. But you can see like even that I like when I was picking this out, I was like, this is kind of random. How am I gonna relate these together? Turns out I can do that really easily because they're just that influential. Moving on. Next we're going to talk about Pamela. I don't like this book. I don't like it. I'm doing my dissertation on it and I don't like it. Anyway, yeah, this is Pamela. Pamela is really boring. I don't like her at all. Oh, we'll read this first. Where's the thingy page? Where is the thingy page gone? There we go. Because sometimes the Oxford World Classics are my favourite editions. They have the original like title pages inside and they're really interesting to read in themselves, you know. Read the paratext too, that's interesting. This book, Pamela or Virtue Eroded, in order to cultivate the principles of virtue and religion in the minds of the youth of both sexes. It's interesting what it tries to do and the reaction that it provoked essentially from people who all loved it or hated it. Those who loved, like it was being phrased in like church sermons and like people were like, read this, it's amazing for like, put your children on a virtuous path. But then other people thought it was a pile of fucking wank. So you get a lot of parodies of it and the way that then it influences other texts and other people. Like I know that Diderot was inspired, like Diderot took elements of the way Richardson wrote, not necessarily what he wrote. If you read The Nun, my god, you will know that it is not exactly the same as this. I'm not going to say what I just put on screen because otherwise I will get demonetized, but that's literature for you. I was having this discussion with I said this in my my cooking bid, and I had this discussion with Mum as well, like that people who don't like literature were just the ones who didn't get the dick joke or the sex joke. This is like also kind of predatory, and the character in it, Mr. B, I think he's called, it's predatory, bit creepy. It's problematic when you're reading, you're like, oh. But then you can understand the reaction that people got being like the reaction that then other texts made to this being a lot more like fun and saucy, because this is painful to read in terms of like, I'm bored, I want to stab myself. But again, the reason this continues to be printed is because it's influence and why it's really, really important to read this in terms to understand why other 18th century texts, also French ones, did what they did. It's all connected. I just drew that on myself. I thought that was going to be dramatic and cool, but it just ended up hurting. Moving on, further forwards and a bit to Germany. But not Germany, because Germany didn't exist, but did, but didn't. But anyway, this is The Stories of Young Werther. This is one of the like fundamental, like if you want to do the romantics, just read this first. It's very thin, doesn't take you very long. But this is when people talk about romantics, one text I can understand people haven't read if they want to talk about it. It's very short, it's an epistolary novel as well. I do love a good epistolary novel. It's just, he's like the romantic Hamlet, in my opinion. So back to this. He is like the romantic Hamlet. I won't spoil it, but if you've read it, everyone kind of knows what happens at the end, but I'm not going to tell you in case you haven't read it. But I think it tells you at the beginning, but I don't know if it does. It's so melancholy and so Werther like takes so much from the texts that he reads, especially like the fake, like pretend found northern like classic of the Ossian, which is like a fake epic written for the northern countries, but it's not really an epic. It was written like recently. But it's just interesting about like talking about the emotional influence of literature on a person, and just the whole sensitivity of certain souls, which you get so much in the romantic literature, especially the differences between temperaments, northern and southern countries, which you actually then get a lot in Enlightenment as well. It's this whole idea of like the differences between southern and northern peoples of those climates, and you get that in a bit in Rousseau as well, even though we don't like Rousseau in this house. It's just, if you want to do romantic, it's very short, just read this, even if you're doing English, because I feel like not enough of my English friends who do the romantics know who Werther is, and I'm like, how can you not know? How can you not know? Especially because it does come up when you do any Italian romantics, Werther does come up. Werther comes up, when you do complete and the romantics, Werther comes up all the freaking time. So I do the Italian romantics, but I don't think they get enough credit when you do English. Even though Byron fucks off to Italy, so why wouldn't you talk about the Italian romantics? So does Shelley, like, and Foscolo fucks off to Italy. No, he doesn't. He fucks off to England from Greece, but it was Italy, but kind of, and then goes to Venice and then fucks off. So it's just like, why wouldn't you talk about that? If you're going to talk about the romantics, you have to talk about so much, because it's such a movement that was like everywhere, not just England. We're going to do War and Peace next. Yep, this is intense. Okay, I've only read half of it, I would admit, but if you've studying anything about the Napoleonic Wars, Holler at me, Charter has a Pamela. Literally goes right into there. But I'm pretty good to compare these a little bit when I write, because I'm writing an essay on. Definitely writing an essay on that one because I love it so much. It's funny how like Tolstoy sees everything, and it's just read it. It doesn't come up that much, I will admit, because it is a more recent text. And when that's 200 years are recent, then you know you're doing conflict. Anyway, it's just the way he gets into characters is fantastic, and the way you make them understand. It's honestly like a modern epic. I mean, fucking look at it. It's longer than the Odyssey and the Iliad together, I think. It's just one as well that like everyone should read, 'cause it's just very enjoyable, and you just get so attached to the characters. And the fact that I only got to read half of it because then A-level started and I didn't have time killed me. Yes, the first 40 pages are dull. Get through that and you'll have some of the most ridiculous war thing you've ever experienced. And then also you've got to understand that you don't invade Russia in winter, and everybody knows that, apart from one person who got it, well, two people who clearly got it drastically wrong. But everyone knows you don't invade Russia in winter. I loved The Leopard. You know, a lot of Italians who have to study this in school don't like it. It's like us having to study To Kill a Mockingbird or Of Mice and Men, two texts distinctly left off this list because they're shit. Anyway, I really like The Leopard. I feel like even though it is written, my mum says that she kind of like forgets, a lot of colleagues do, that this was not written in the 19th century. This is written in the 20th century. The way Lampedusa gets into a time that he doesn't from is so convincing, and he's like, even the detail he goes into, and also how much you learn about Italy from this, especially during the reunification. Very interesting, and I just really enjoyed it. And it's like, because it goes over a lot, like, because it's over such a long span of time, and the way you like get attached to characters, I just really enjoyed. I just really like it. I have a soft spot for it, and if you want to study anything about Italy, this is a really good way to get like the literary way into the history of it. I don't necessarily enjoy reading just like a history book, so if I'm going to be taught something about history, I kind of do prefer to have it through literature. I will fess up to. That's like this, that. What else? Yeah, that's kind of like the way I've understood Napoleon, is through the romantics, actually. Because I didn't really know anything about Napoleon before. Now the last thing, which is jumping a lot further, this is my copy of The Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. Bit of postmodernism for you. It's not everyone's cup of tea, so I'm not here recommending Ulysses. References everything. But as a Catholic, I thought The Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man was intense. I had a crisis about religion and death and hell about at like 3 in the morning while reading this. So packs a punch. Also, it's quite interesting to see like reading Joyce's life into this novel, where everyone were like, oh, but you shouldn't, but could you, but should you, but can you? And you definitely can, because his like life biographically maps onto this book so intensely. I just thought it was really good. And if you're gonna read, it's like a more like accessible bit of postmodernism, really. And I just think haven't really read anything Irish. And so I just really recommend it. Don't even make notes in this copy. I should. Oh, I didn't even make notes. Wow, I didn't make notes in this book. Because it is one that when people ask me what should I read, it's one that I do want to recommend. Even though it's not necessarily as related as the rest of these texts are. I mean, I guess I can definitely grab up Dante and Hamlet, because I mean, you can pretty much grab any text and be like, okay, I'm gonna grab up a couple of these classics and I will find a way to relate them back, because you always can, even if maybe you're pushing it a bit sometimes, you can just still generally get away with it. That's why if you ever want to bring another text, bring in some of the classical ones, and you will basically always be fine and get away with it, because trust me, the authors you read have read these texts. That's why they are so important to a competent student anyways. Yes, my battery is flashing the colour of my lipstick, so I'm going to very quickly bid you farewell. I will definitely do a video on Emma recommending books she hasn't read, because I seem to be quite good at that. I will leave as well, down in the comments, leave me any books you think everyone should read. I will list other ones, because I asked you guys on Twitter, so I will also leave some other recommendations people have left, even if I don't personally agree with them as a competent student. So yeah, because I mean, I'm not going to recommend to you Oliver Twist or Great Expectations, like I'm just fucking not, okay? They don't come up ever. So before my camera dies, like, subscribe and all that jazz. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching. I'm making videos every Tuesday at the moment, because work, dissertation, relationships, university, it's a lot. So yeah, like, subscribe and all that jazz, and I'll see you guys very, very soon. Bye. Dad? He's in the kitchen.